Notre Dame's blue gold game has come and gone, meaning the Irish have completed their spring practice. And as you would expect, there's plenty of talking points to get into. We are joined by our Notre Dame insider, Pete Sampson, to recap the spring from South Bend. Pete, let's start with the man in charge, Marcus Freeman. Have you noticed any differences or changes from Freeman's first spring?
He's talked about the change in perspective of last year. They were like trying to win every drill, and it was much more of a sort, I think, a micro view. And this year, it seems to be much more macro, where there's I think, an understanding that progress is not going to be a straight line. That the offense and the defense don't need to be sort of moving at the same pace with one another. And I think it just has much more of like a head coach's perspective on things than a coordinator who's learning to be a head coach. So I think it's just much more measured and balanced the way he's gone about it. And I think just accepting the fact that the defense is ahead of the offense from start, maybe until finish, but definitely open spring that way. And I think that his point of view and just sort of like how everything fits together, how his staff fits together, has matured quite a bit from where it was in year one.
Now, you had wrote about Sam Hartman's huge spring game for the Irish.
Yeah.
And after a rocky start to the spring, how important is that for Hartman to kind of take hold of the offense heading into the 2023 season?
I think it was inevitable that this was going to happen. The fact that it sort of happened at the end of spring opposed to the beginning of fall camp, I think really just sort of changes the tenor around Notre Dame football. Especially for the fan base, it makes you think about what's possible opposed to, in some ways, maybe dreading some parts of the season. So I think it just sort of it made Hartman look like we thought he was going to look the whole time and then didn't. But then at the end, you're like, oh, yes, this is the guy who threw 110 touchdown passes at Wake Forest and basically 13,000 yards. So it made Notre Dame look like they have a top 5 quarterback in the country, maybe it's certainly top 10 at worst. And it's been a while since I think Notre Dame would take an honest look at itself and say, like, do we have one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the country? The answer is definitely yes after Saturday. And I think that that's how it was going to be all along with Hartman. But to be able to sort of see it in the stadium with sort of, in a game like situation, that to me is very significant.
Staying on the offensive side of the ball, Gerard Parker was elevated from tight ends coach to offensive coordinator in the offseason. Were there any stylistic changes from Tommy Reese's offense this past month? And can we expect that this season?
I think it's much more personnel driven than personality driven, if that makes sense. Like, there's no Michael Mayer, and then they played without the guy who's supposed to replace Michael Mayer and the guy behind the guy who was supposed to replace Michael Mayer. So it's not sort of Notre Dame as you've come to expect with like 4 NFL tight ends that are interchangeable. Right now, they may not have any. So it much more receiver based offense. So it's gonna, I think, look more pass first. I think it's gonna look more explosive. It might be just easier to watch. So stylistically, maybe fewer checks and adjustments of the line of scrimmage. Reese really like to try to outthink the defense. I don't think Gerard Parker is going to have that sort of same approach where he's going to try to win the game with a call or a look or a shift. But I think from stylistically, a more pass first approach says a lot more about the quarterback and the receivers than it does about the guy calling the plays.
Flipping to the other side of the ball now, this will be Al Golden's second season as defensive coordinator. What kind of spring has the defense had so far?
I think it was better than expected because the defensive line was better than expected. That was probably the biggest question mark at the inside the program overall about, like, were they able to rush the passer? Could they stop the run? Those are two pretty important things. And there's no Isaiah Foskey. I mean, you go back to recent years where they had Jerry Tillery or Julian Aquara, Khalid Kareem, like NFL guys, basically at all 4 positions. With this group, you're not sure if you have any when spring starts. You come out of it thinking like, okay, maybe there's not a high end talent like a Foskey, but they probably have 8 or 9 guys who can play, and Notre Dame would feel good about it. And that to me was a big jump forward because I wasn't sure if Notre Dame had the quality at the top or the quantity from top to bottom. And I think I come out of spring thinking like, all right, quality at the top, still a question, but the quantity from top to bottom at the defensive line, I think that Notre Dame feels really good about it. Probably better, much better than they did when spring practice opened.
To wrap up, an interesting question posed to you in one of your recent mailbags, which can be found in the description below, was asking to tier Notre Dame's position groups. Let's go kind of both ends of the spectrum. Where
Mhm.
do the Irish have championship level depth and talent, and where are they in need of desperate help?
I think that championship level, let's say just like college football playoff um, aspirant, that'd probably be the best way to put it. Quarterback, running back, offensive line. I argue for linebacker. I think linebacker is much better than I think a lot of the fan base gives it credit for. I think corner is really good. So those spots I think are legit strengths. Defensive line and receiver, those are sort of the swing positions to me where if those groups can get better, and I think you saw it from the receiver position, especially working with Sam Hartman, whether that be Jaden Thomas or Jaden Greathouse, both had big spring games. Tobias Merriweather's a receiver they have high hopes for. That position I think could make the difference on offense to make it a championship level offense or a college football playoff offense. And then the same is true on the defensive line, like I just talked about in terms of the depth there. They just need somebody better at the top. Safety by far to me is the weakness of the team right now, and whether that's going into the portal, moving a guy there, I think the portal makes a lot more sense. They need more help there. They took Thomas Harper from Oklahoma State last offseason as a transfer. He's come off shoulder surgery, didn't do much in spring, didn't play in the spring game, and maybe more of like an undersized safety or a nickel type. They need a bigger body back there. Xavier Watts, I think, has a chance to have a good season. But beyond that, I think they go into the season shorthanded at safety if they don't take somebody in the portal. So with that over the next week or so, that's got to be a high, high priority for the staff. Is like, can they find somebody to augment or enhance the roster that they have?
Well, for more on Notre Dame, go check out and read Pete's work on The Athletic, as well as follow him on Twitter. The stories and mailbags referenced are linked in the description below, so don't miss out. Pete, thanks so much for your insight.
Anytime. Thanks.